Welcome to Money Mondays with Melissa, where we talk about financial empowerment while exploring financial assistance available through local, state, and federal governments each month with a diverse group of subject matter experts. Chicago, are you ready to get financially empowered? Well, we've got just what you need. Without further ado, give it up for your Chicago City Treasurer, Melissa Conyears-Ervin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here with the Chicago Treasurer's Office. My name is Benji Wax. I'm proud to be representing the work that we do. Today, we've got a wonderful episode for you, and we're so excited to bring Sergio to the stage. Sergio Rodriguez is an investor and a community relations officer at Self-Help Federal Credit Union with a background in education and nonprofits. He is currently pursuing an MBA in finance and leads initiatives that help families manage debt and build economic stability. Sergio remains dedicated to expanding financial literacy and empowering communities to advocate for their own financial futures. Please join me in welcoming Sergio to Money Mondays. Sergio, thanks so much for being here, sir. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. And like Benji said, thank you for the great introduction. I'm super excited to share this information and help folks in Chicago really empower themselves on their economic journey. And with that, we could get started.
Take it away, sir.
So our topic for today is debt management and budget building. So our agenda today covers getting prepared to tackle your debt, which I know can be scary, the options that we have to pay off debt, and how to build and adjust a budget. So we'll talk about by looking at ways that we can prepare to pay our debt off, right? First of all, we need to have a clear understanding of our current financial situation. And that means what kind of income are you receiving? What sources is it coming from? And after we list all of our income, we need to look at all of our current account balances. And income isn't limited to just what we work, what we have from our paychecks. It could be child support, it could be Social Security, it could be alimony, any money that you might receive from an external source that contributes to your financial income, your financial picture, that is considered income. So when we list all of our income, we want to make sure that we detail everything that we owe, every person that we owe, every creditor that we owe. And on top of that, we want to make sure that we include all of our expenses like childcare, food, gas, entertainment, subscriptions, our credit card debt. And for our credit card debt, we want to make sure that we write our balances, our interest rates, our current monthly payments. And you actually have the ability to see this all in one place if you pull your credit report for free at annualcreditreport.com. So everyone is able to get one copy for free of the credit report at the website. Please do not pay for your credit report because you have at least one copy every year for free. So we're going to cover 5 different options today for getting out of debt. And these include on your own, a debt consolidation loan, a debt settlement, bankruptcy, and a debt management plan. So on your own, you have the option of a debt snowball, which this is a method, which is a strategy where you pay off debt in order from smallest to your largest balance, and you gain momentum as you go. It is extremely important that you make sure you always make the minimum payment on all accounts and then pay any extra funds towards the smallest account. And you can also consider a debt avalanche, which is the strategy of putting all your money, of allocating enough money to make the minimum payment on each debt and then paying extra to the debt with the highest interest rate. Similar to a snowball, which pays off the smallest balance first and then the largest, a debt avalanche pays the balance with the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate. So you want to make sure that you organize the way that you are paying off your debt. There's strategies. The debt snowball often feels more rewarding because you start paying off your small balances first. And when you pay your small balances first, it kind of gives you this encouragement to continue on to your next balance. So there's a lot of creditors and hardship programs or internal promotions that could be offered to you. So this would require you to call the credit card company and ask them what kind of programs you may qualify for. The pros of this is doesn't cost anything. Like this is something that you do at home while you look at your budget, and there's no application, no underwriting requirements. No one else has to approve this, and there's typically no impact to your credit report. And some things to consider is that with paying it on your own, there is a lot of a self accountability that you have to follow the plan. So you may set up your payment plans in either that snowball or the avalanche, but you have to hold yourself accountable to be able to make sure that you pay this on your own, which could be challenging for some of us who may have other expenses or other things that we need to take care of first. And it's also a time commitment. It takes a lot of time to do this because you are structuring it on your own. And so, another example that we'll talk about is that consolidation loan. For many of us, there's not enough money left over each month to pay our bills. So, increasing payments on a credit card for people who are barely making it or even just breaking even might not be the best option. So the other option that we can consider is a debt consolidation loan. And this loan can come in many different forms. The purpose of this is to borrow money and use that money to pay off other debts and have one monthly payment versus paying three, four, five, six different accounts. So these can be unsecured, which means that whoever you get your debt consolidation loan may not require you to put up collateral, right? And on the other hand, there's a secured loan, which this requires you to put up collateral. And what I mean by that is that the bank or the loan or the people who are loaning this consolidation loan out to you may require you to put up your house, put equity, put a title of your home, so that they can secure that. It mainly functions for the fact that if you can't pay off this debt, that this loan that they gave you to pay off your debt, they may go after your personal property. And the pros of this is that it's one fixed monthly payment and it's typically for a fixed term. So with a debt consolidation loan, you are going to pay one monthly payment, and it could range from a couple years to 2 to 3 years to 5 years, but you know exactly when you'll be done paying this loan. And the goal of getting a consolidation loan is typically you lock in a lower interest rate and therefore ideally a lower monthly payment than any of your previous payments combined. And your credit accounts may not be closed. So this one important thing, that if you have a debt consolidation loan, sometimes you can keep your credit card or your credit lines open. They may not be closed. There is an option that we'll talk about later on where you have to close those accounts. Some considerations for a consolidation loan is that you have to be able to qualify and be approved for this, and it does impact your credit. And the collateral you put up for the loan is at risk. If you default or you fall behind on your payments, like I mentioned earlier, they might come after your personal property. So the next example is a debt settlement, which can also be known as debt relief. If you looked on the internet for debt help, you see a lot of settlement company ads, or you even see them driving through the city or on the radio. In general, this is a solution that is typically best used for someone to work on cleaning up debt after it's already in collection. So this is mainly if you are at a point where your debt is in collections, you're getting phone calls or getting letters about late payments or missed payments for a number of period. And a debt settlement is a negotiation between the creditor and the borrower to pay back a portion of the outstanding debt, while the remainder of the debt is forgiven. For example, you might owe $5,000 on a debt, and the creditor can agree for you to settle if you pay 3,500, and and the rest that you owe would be 1,500. That's forgiven. Debt settlement and debt relief companies also attempt to negotiate a settlement on your own, but it's up to your creditor to be able to accept that negotiation. Uh, the pros of a debt settlement is that you potentially save money, right? Which is something that we want. You have a potential lower payment, a monthly payment, and it can help resolve collection balances quicker because those collection balances appear in your credit report, and this is going to impact you in any future borrowing you may need for a home or a car loan. So that's something to keep in mind. And can be a way to avoid last resort options like non-payment and bankruptcy. Some things to consider though. It is up to the creditor's discretion if they're willing to negotiate a settlement. Not all creditors are willing to participate in a debt settlement program or negotiate a settlement with you with a debt settlement or with a debt settlement company working on your behalf. So that's something to consider. It is up to this credit card company or the loan company if they're willing to take your settlements. If your accounts are current, they will typically fall past due, and this can impact your credit, and it can impact the balances you owed, and you could be potentially sent to collections or legal action. So the debt settlement usually works after you are already in collection. So once you're in collection, these are some of the things that you should consider. Um, and it could actually cost you more money and more time in the long run. Um, and potentially tax liability. So this is something that we don't ever really talk about. So once you have a credit is settled and you have a portion of that forgiven, sometimes that's considered income. So you end up getting tax on those. That's something that a lot of debt consolidation or debt settling companies don't tell you, is that if those 1,500 that the credit card company kind of forgave, you end up paying taxes on that in your next year tax return. So another way is bankruptcy, right? And bankruptcy is usually pretty scary. It is the legal process that is like, this is kind of your last ditch effort. So bankruptcy is a legal process in which people who cannot repay debts to creditors may seek relief for some or all of their debts. You can file for bankruptcy without an attorney, but it's typically not recommended. Typically, this should be reserved as a last resort after exploring all other options due to the significant impact it could have. There are two main types of personal bankruptcy: a Chapter 13, which does typically require repayment through the court of all or a portion of your debt, or Chapter 7, which allows debt to be discharged without requiring payment. Talking with an attorney can help you understand which you may be eligible for. Many bankruptcy attorneys will offer a free initial consultation to help you get some clarity on what filing bankruptcy may look like for you. Again, there are pros and cons here. A pro that would be for filing bankruptcy, it may be able to stop adverse action, including garnishment of your wages, repossession, and foreclosure. Absolutely seek legal advice if this is something you are facing. Bankruptcy may also stop collection costs and provide you some relief as well. Depending on the terms of your bankruptcy, you may end up paying out less to creditors than you would with other options. However, and this is important, there are upfront expenses involved. Typically, filing a bankruptcy involves attorney and court fees that must be paid. Really weigh this out carefully if you're considering bankruptcy, as there are additional fees that you have to pay on top of potentially paying back what you owe. And your income and assets can have an impact on your ability to file and have debts discharged. Not all forms of debt are able to be included and discharged in a bankruptcy. So again, this may be that some of the debts you do have may not qualify for bankruptcy. And a bankruptcy can stay on your credit report for up to 10 years, impacting your ability to obtain future credit and the cost of obtaining that credit. It's not impossible to rebuild credit after a bankruptcy, but it is a bit more of an uphill battle. Again, it is really important to weigh, especially in the instance of a Chapter 13 bankruptcy that would typically still require a debt repayment. If there is another option to repay debt that can avoid a credit impact of bankruptcy, it is really worth exploring that option. And our fifth option is a debt management plan. This is probably one of the least known options out of the five. And since one that a lot of people don't talk about, we want to make sure that we're able to share this with you today. This is usually offered by a nonprofit credit counseling agency. A debt management plan is typically for unsecured debt like credit cards, collection accounts, medical bills, and in some cases, payday and personal loans. Although these tend to be more case by case due to the credit card and collection companies. Uh, and some of our partners, and one of our partners is a, that offers a debt management plan is called GreenPath Financial Wellness, which is also the people who we usually if you're in these situations, GreenPath is one of our partners that we usually refer people. So through a debt management plan, GreenPath creates a structured repayment plan to pay down debt in full, and they reach out to your creditors on your behalf. And they try to potentially get a lower interest rate and perhaps get your fees waived because they're the ones negotiating with your creditors. This is different from a debt settlement program because GreenPath does not negotiate the balance themselves. It simply negotiates the terms of the debt repayment, and the creditors are involved in every step of the way. They send your creditors a proposal, and if they agree on a certain payment or offer a certain interest rate until the debt is paid off, and they continue to get a payment from you every month. So with GreenPath or other nonprofit debt management plans, you usually pay them, and then they distribute that money to your creditors. So a pro of this debt management plan is that there is no minimum credit score or approval requirements like there would be with a loan. Balances are usually paid off in 3 to 5 years, and it's one consolidated payment. And a debt management plan also offers a benefit of getting money to one place. So you make a deposit to GreenPath or another nonprofit debt management agency, and then, like I mentioned, they distribute that payment to your creditors on your behalf, which makes this a much easier option than juggling multiple payments and multiple due dates. And finally, one of the biggest pros of a debt management plan is that a creditor is able to offer it. Every creditor has different terms that they are willing to offer. So it will vary from creditor to creditor, but many are able to offer significantly reduced interest rates, which leads to lower monthly payments required that are required less needs to keep going up with your interest charges while still being able to complete your debt management plan in a couple of years. Some considerations that you should take into account is that after you complete your debt management plan, you have to close that account, and that credit card or that personal loan, that line of credit will no longer be available to you. And there is a possible initial impact to your credit report, and not all creditors are willing to work with a debt management plan. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is up to the discretion of the creditors. But from my research and my understanding, most of them will. But again, not everyone wants to work with not every creditor wants to work with a debt management plan. Typically, there's a small setup and maintenance fee, um, which the management plan for those who choose to do it, the fees are regulated by state law and can vary from state to state, but they're typically based on the amount of debt that you owe and do not exceed over 75. Typically, any fee for debt management plan is significantly outweighed by the savings obtained through the concessions the creditor will give you. And some tips to stay on track. I know there's a lot of information and a lot of like heavy topics, but some tips to stay on track is develop a budget, which we'll talk about later. Uh, Track your spending closely to make sure that you are on track. Develop an emergency savings account and look for opportunities to reduce your expenses or increase income. And we have to set realistic goals and know why you want to get out of debt. I mean, we all know why we want to get out of debt, but having that motivational factor and really a clear picture of the future would help you stay on track. And so now that you know what the options for managing your debt are, we can continue on building your budget so that we can help you stay on track. So, the first step is to start listing all of your reliable and consistent income. You want to set yourself up for success here. So, only include income that you can rely on. Things like overtime, bonuses, other income that you get from time to time may not be the best things to include because they do fluctuate. So, the next thing you want to do is list everything you're currently spending money on. List the amount of any fixed expenses or expenses that are usually around the same each month. Then move into listing all your other expenses, which can be a little bit tricky when they vary more. You need to do your best to determine the average amount of money you spend in variable expense categories. So, a variable expense is something that changes every month, and a fixed expense is something that is kind of the same every month. So, like your insurance bill is usually a fixed expense, your rent or your mortgage is a fixed expense. A variable expense might be, trying to think of a variable expense. Like if you go out to eat one more time than you usually do, that's usually a variable expense. And what when you add up your expenses, what do they look like? This is where you start to list your financial goals, right? And you're putting money into your savings and paying off debt more aggressively and taking new or increased payment of some type. Whatever that is, you should list it here in your future expenses. So next, you need to make a list of all those expenses, both current expenses and expenses you need to add on, in order of most important to least important to you. Know how know how you think other people would prioritize the expenses prioritize based on what's most important to you. So when you have all your expenses listed out, you want to make sure that you are prioritizing what's important to you. So the expenses that might be important to me may not look like the same for you all who are doing this at home. So you want to make sure that this budget works for your personal needs as well. So some things to consider is you have to review your expenses, your expense amounts, and where you might be able to reduce some of this spending. And I'm going to list a couple of categories coming up. These are mostly what is kind of on the costly side. So these are called the costly C's, which include your clothes, cars, cola or beverages, coffee, cable, cinema, cigarettes, cell phones, children expenses, carryout, and convenience. The other things that are really costly that I don't think we are kind of aware of is our subscription services. So any streaming services, it's easy to be like, hey, I can afford another $10 subscription service a month. But really looking into how much of those services are really adding up. So you have Amazon Prime, Chewy if you have pets, or any food delivery service like Uber Eats or DoorDash, grocery delivery services. If you have any subscriptions to magazines, newspapers, online websites, Apple Music, Spotify, and then your subscriptions to like your wholesale or warehouse stores. So you need to be aware of all those subscriptions when you just start listing your expenses because they do add up. And then at the end of your list, you want to put what are your low priority expenses. So these are a low priority expense. Like what is something that you could probably cut out of your budget. So you want to be able to review your income and any opportunities to bring in more money. So after you list your expenses, you will want to see how much of that income is coming in, and kind of identify places where either you can increase that income amount so that we can cover any gaps in your budget. Once you've considered ways to reduce your expenses and increase your income, start over and work your way down the list again. And this is where you want to be able to find where you can build your budget that works for you. And you want to be able to repeat these steps until you get down to like your core and your priority expenses. And again, one of the most important things about building a budget is that a budget is not to restrict you from things that you want and need, because if you restrict yourself, you're going to end up failing. But it's more so to make sure that you can keep and stay on track and assign every dollar to a specific category or cost or expense or bill payment. So you want to make sure that your dollars are working for you, that you know exactly where every dollar is being spent. And so your first budget is always a draft. You want to be able to rework your budget until you're able to really have something that is sustainable for you. And this is GreenPath, which is our financial literacy partner. They are a nationwide nonprofit, and they do provide financial education tools that help empower people to lead financially healthy lives. And they do offer budget and credit report reviews, rent, mortgage, and home buying counseling, options to deal with debt and student loan counseling. And this is their information up here if you would like more information from them. But all I have for you all today.
Thank you for tuning in to Money Mondays with Melissa. We hope you enjoyed today's session and found value in the topic of discussion. Follow Chicago City Treasurer on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn to stay on top of all upcoming events. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Chicago Treasurer's Office at 312-744-3356 or visit www.chicagocitytreasurer.com. We'll see you next time for Money Mondays with Melissa.